Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, Staff Training and Research Institute of Distance Education, STRIDE, Master's Degree Programs, Master of Arts, Distance Education, MADE, Second Year. MDE415 Research for Distance Education. Block-2 Research Methods for Distance Education. Unit 1 Methods of Educational Research 1. 1.0 Introduction. Educational researchers study the socio-cultural implications involved in education. In this regard, different scientific disciplines have influenced educational research in terms of theorization as well as methods adopted in the pursuit of knowledge. Doing educational research is not just about selecting and constructing a data collection technique. On the contrary, it embraces conceptualization of the problem, theoretical debate, specification of research practices, analytic frameworks, and epistemological presuppositions. Educational research depends on empirical methods to collect information regarding matters concerning education. In trying to seek explanations for what is observed, most scientists usually make use of positivistic assumptions and perspectives. However, the phenomenologist challenges these assumptions and concentrates primarily on experiential reality and its descriptions rather than on causal explanations. In critical research, the researcher is prepared to abandon lines of thought which do not get beneath surface appearances. It involves a constant questioning of the perspective and the analyses that the researcher is building up. This unit presents a brief account on empiricist and empiricism, phenomenology and critical paradigm. 1.1 Objectives. On the completion of this unit, you should be able to describe the empirical research process, explain the meaning of phenomenology and differentiate it from positivism, explain the phenomenological approaches in social science research, list the functions of critical paradigm, and describe the elements and approaches of critical social research. 1.2 Empiricism. An empiricist is one who practices empiricism, i.e., the system which, rejecting all a priori knowledge, rests solely on experience and induction. To Bacon goes the honor of being the first martyr of empiricism. Bacon, 1561–1626, one of the modern scientific thinkers, is known for his emphasis on induction, the use of direct observation to confirm ideas and the linking together of observed facts to form theories or explanations of how natural phenomena work. Social life is visibly chaotic. Its basic characteristic is flow and flux. Its concrete ingredients are people. The substance of our observation is events, each of them unique. Just as each human being is unique. As strict empiricists, we must confront the truth that we work with apparent disorder, non-replicable people and non-repetitive events. The social scientist working in any human society is well aware of this, and her model of society and of social action is probabilistic. The confusion is worse for the alien observer than for the resident actor. The latter has been socialized to her milieu, and part of her socialization is the impression of a model of order. The actor is looking at the same chaos as the observer, but he thinks that he is seeking something else. The newly arrived social researcher, on the other hand, sees randomness, but he assumes that this is a result of her ignorance of the system and the insufficiency of her observations. To the extent that we treat actors' conduct and the like as entities, we depart from pure, observer-oriented empiricism. 1.2.1 Empirical inquiry. Empirical scientific research is essentially a way of looking at things. It can be thought of as a method of approaching to the empirical world. Science consists of theory and facts. A fact is an empirically verifiable observation and a theory tries to find relationships between facts. The facts of science are the product of observations. Theory construction is the most important objective of empirical scientific inquiries. Theory usually gives orientation to empirical inquiries. Theory guides the collection of relevant data and offers a conceptual scheme to bind them together in a more systematic manner. Theories represent an improvement in our knowledge. They also help us to predict facts. In a way, facts help to initiate theories and to test the validity of existing theories. They clarify and redefine theory. Theories and facts stimulate each other and contribute to the growth of empirical knowledge. Empirical studies include the whole gamut of research tools: observation, both participant and non-participant, formal interviews with random samples, semi-structured, unstructured and in-depth interviewing, key informant testimonies, analysis of personal and institutional documents, mass media analysis, archive searching, examination of official statistics, and reviews of published literature. Furthermore, empirical social research also uses a wide variety of analytical techniques: ethnographic interpretation, historical reconstruction, action research, multivariate analysis, structuralist deconstruction and semiological analysis. 1.2.2 Empirical research process. Empirical research involves the pursuit of truth as determined by facts and logical considerations. It is aimed at a systematic interrelation of facts by experimentation, observation, and logical procedures. It encourages a rigorous impersonal procedure, dictated by the demand of logic and objective procedure. It is a method wherein the investigation proceeds in a systematic and orderly manner. Empirical research usually consists of the following steps. 1. Collecting data by means of careful and critical observation with patience, precision and impartiality. 2. Measurement. 3. Classification and tabulation of data. 4. Analysis and reduction. 5. Formulation of hypothesis. And 6. Formulation of a theory or a law. The following are the main features of empirical scientific research. 1. Observation. 2. Use of concepts. 3. Objectivity. 4. Verifiability. 5. Predictability. 6. Systematic nature. 1. Observation. Empirical research relies on observation for obtaining knowledge. In a sense, the keystone of any inquiry is observation. Observation supplies us with the something, which you then try to understand and explain. But empirical observation is not casual. It is a conscious and deliberate activity designed to reduce error. It is aided by certain devices which enhance accuracy. These devices usually add great precision to scientific observations, which cannot be achieved by our sense organs. Empirical observation is most fruitful when it is guided by a hunch or a general idea as to what is to be observed. Otherwise, there is a possibility that the empiricist is lost in a welter of facts which she may not know what to do with. Meaningful observation results in the establishment of facts. Collection of facts through observation is not only important for verifying empirical theories, but also for building them, modifying or improving them. 2. Concepts. Concepts are the building blocks of scientific empirical research. Scientific theories usually consist of several interrelated concepts. Concepts are fundamental to all human communication and thought. But the concepts that we use in our day-to-day affairs are not always clear and precise. In some cases, not all would use a word in the same sense. On the other hand, different words may be used to convey a similar meaning. Empirical research requires that the concepts used are defined with precision. Precision in defining concepts usually fosters clear thinking on the part of the empiricist himself, herself. At the same time, precise definitions convey to others what exactly is meant by the empiricist when she uses the concept. Lack of clarity may lead to statements which seem to provide explanations when in fact they do not. 3. Objectivity. Objectivity means that the conclusions we reach in empirical research are not affected by our personal views or values. It also means that similar or same conclusions can be reached by any person who repeats the same set of observations. It permits the repetition of observations under practically identical conditions. This facilitates the verification of facts and theories by many empiricists independently. 4. Verifiability. Any finding is said to be empirical only if it can be verified. If a theory involves things which cannot be verified, the theory tends to be metaphysical rather than scientific. The empirical conclusions are liable for verification at any time. Thus, an empirical scientific theory of generalization stands to be rejected at any time. Future observations, new findings in other disciplines may render old theories untenable. This is one of the reasons Why scientific conclusions are never final, but are continuously tentative and provisional. 5. Predictability. Empirical researchers are interested in prediction. Precise predictions constitute one of the most impressive achievements of the empirical researchers. Predictability usually depends upon two things: 1. The nature of the phenomena themselves, and 2. Knowledge of the causes of the phenomena. If the number of causes is more, prediction becomes more and more difficult. Prediction depends, to a large extent, on our ability to arrive at precise theories. Precision in prediction also depends upon accurate measurement. All predictions are fundamentally uncertain. We can say that social science predictions as well as predictions in physical sciences tend to be probabilistic. However, it is true that predictions in social sciences usually have a lower probability of success than those in physical sciences. 6. Systematic nature. Empirical investigation is systematic in many ways. It is thorough and rigorous, as it makes use of designs to guard against errors which may creep in at the time of collection of data as well as at the time of interpretation and drawing generalizations from the data. Empirical investigation encourages a systematic report on the methods used to collect data, the hypotheses formulated, the techniques used for analysis, and the logic used for making generalizations. Because of this, the empiricist himself, herself, or her colleagues have an opportunity of finding flaws that may enter at any stage of investigation. It is in this sense that empirical investigation is self-correcting. Empirical investigation is systematic in another sense also. It aims at arriving at a set of propositions that are consistent with one another and not self-contradictory. It is the systematic nature of empirical investigations that distinguishes the scientific attitude and temperament from other non-scientific attitudes and temperaments. Sometimes people may reach the right conclusions, but that does not make the statements scientific unless they follow from the right premises. It is the overall procedure followed that sets the empirical scientific investigations and the conclusions apart from others. 1.3 Phenomenology. Phenomenology is a philosophy of knowledge that emphasizes direct observation of phenomena. Unlike positivists, however, phenomenologists seek to sense reality and to describe it in words rather than numbers, words that reflect consciousness and perception. The philosophical foundations of phenomenology were developed by Edmund Husserl, 1859–1938, who argued that the scientific method, appropriate for the study of physical phenomena, was inappropriate for the study of human thought and action. Phenomenologists concentrate on phenomena per se, and try to produce convincing descriptions of what they experience rather than explanations and causes. Good ethnography is usually good phenomenology, and there is no substitute for a good story, well told. The split between the scientific approach and the humanistic phenomenological approach pervades the human sciences. In psychology, most research is in the quantitative scientific tradition, while phenomenology flourishes in clinical work because its practitioners cogently point out it works. In sociology, there is a significant, but small, tradition of qualitative, phenomenological research, but the field is mostly dominated by the quantitative, positivistic approach. The reverse is true in cultural anthropology, in which there is a significant, quantitative, positivistic research, but most of the field is qualitatively and phenomenologically oriented. The term phenomenology needs some clarification because it is talked about a good deal these days and is frequently used in the most general way to mean any sort of experientially based methodology. Even within the Western philosophical tradition, the word labels a very broad movement and not a precise school or unitary method. Speaking generally, a phenomenological study is one that is grounded in the direct experience of aspects of one's own consciousness. 1.3.1 Positivism vs Phenomenology. The positivist versus the phenomenological approach to the study of man and society is considered in terms of one of the major debates in social science research. Many of the founding fathers of sociology believed that it would be possible to create a science of society based on the same principles and procedures as natural sciences such as chemistry and biology. This approach is known as positivism. They believed that this would reveal that the evolution of society followed invariable laws, and that it would show that the behavior of man was governed by principles of cause and effect which were just as invariable as the behavior of matter, the subject of the natural sciences. The behavior of man, like the behavior of matter, can be objectively measured. Just as the behavior of matter can be quantified by measures such as weight, temperature and pressure, methods of objective measurement can be devised for human behavior. Such measurement is essential to explain behavior. For example, in order to explain the reaction of a particular chemical to heat, it is necessary to provide exact measurement of temperature, weight and so on. With such measurements it will be possible to accurately observe the behavior of matter and produce a statement of cause and effect. From a positivist viewpoint, such methods and assumptions are applicable to human behavior. Observations of behavior based on objective measurement, from this viewpoint, will make it possible to produce statements of cause and effect. Theories may then be devised to explain observed behavior. It argues that factors which are not directly observable, such as meanings, feelings and purposes, are not particularly important and can be misleading. For example, if the majority of adult members of society enter into marriage and produce children, these facts can be observed and quantified. They, therefore, form reliable data. However, the range of meanings that members of society give to these activities, their purposes for marriage and procreation, are not directly observable. Even if they could be accurately measured, they may well divert attention from the real cause of behavior. The meanings and purposes they attach to this behavior are largely inconsequential. Phenomenological perspectives in social research reject many of the assumptions of positivism. They argue that the subject matter of social and natural sciences is fundamentally different. As a result, methods and assumptions of the natural sciences are inappropriate to the study of man. The natural sciences deal with matter. They do not have meanings and purposes which direct their behavior. As a result, the natural scientist is able to observe, measure, and impose an external logic on that behavior in order to explain it. She has no need to explore the internal logic of the consciousness of matter simply because it does not exist. Unlike matter, a human being has consciousness, thoughts, feelings, meanings, intentions and an awareness of being. Because of this, her actions are meaningful. She defines situations and gives meaning to her actions and those of others. As a result, she does not merely react to external stimuli, nor does she simply behave. She acts. Imagining the response of early man to fire caused by volcanoes or spontaneous combustion, we can see that he did not react in a uniform manner to the experience of heat. She attached a range of meanings to it, and these meanings directed her actions. For example, she defined fire as a means of warmth and used it to heat her dwellings, as a means of defense and used it to ward off wild animals, and as a means of transforming substances and employed it for cooking and hardening points of wooden spears. Man does not just react to fire, she acts upon the terms of the meanings she gives to it. The researcher cannot simply observe action from the outside and impose an external logic upon it. She must interpret the internal logic, which directs the actions of the actor. The distinction between positivist and phenomenological approaches is not as clear cut as this section has implied. There is considerable debate over whether or not a particular theory should be labeled positivist or phenomenological. Often it is a matter of degree, since many theories lie somewhere between the two extremes. 1.3.2 Phenomenological approaches in social and educational research. Hermeneutical phenomenology. One of the most influential phenomenologies for ethnographic field work is that of Paul Ricoeur, Rasmussen 1971, a French student of Edmund Husserl. Hermeneutics has been derived from the Greek verb hermeneunein, meaning to make something clear, to announce or to unveil a message. Hermeneutics involves a dialogue between a text, e.g., myth, drama, fairy story, dream report, oral history, etc., and the experiences evoked in people participating in the text. The meaning of the text is developed within the consciousness of living people, so that there is a movement from an initial hearing of the text that may then lead to experiences that illuminate the meaning of the text. Later, people may reflect conceptually upon both the text and the memory of experiences related to the text. Transpersonal phenomenology. Transpersonalism is a movement in science toward the recognition of extraordinary experiences as legitimate and useful data. What makes these experiences extraordinary is that they in some sense go beyond the boundaries of ordinary ego consciousness. Transpersonal experiences include such phenomena as out-of-body experiences, visions, possession states, near-death experiences, and meditative, ecstatic, unique and mystical experiences. To give one example of the application of transpersonal phenomenology to ethnographic fieldwork, Lederman, 1988, reported that among Malay healers, the term engin, inner winds, refers to an experience that sometimes occurs during healing rituals. She mentions that her informants declined to define the concept for her, insisting instead that, to know its meaning, she would have to experience engin herself. When she finally undertook the healing ritual herself, she experienced engin, like a hurricane, inside her chest. Thereafter, Lederman was able to evaluate the meaning of the wind metaphor from direct experience. Engin ceased to be merely a belief and was appreciated as a metaphorical description of a real and profound experience. Social phenomenology. Social phenomenology has had an increasing influence upon anthropological thinking about the social dimensions of experience. Schutz advocated the study of society from a special stance that he called the phenomenology of intersubjectivity. Here, the object of scrutiny is one's relationship to another person, rather than some non-human object in the world. The other person, known as the capital O, other, requires a distinct approach in order that the essential qualities of the social relationship may be intuited. Neurophenomenology. The best and the most direct route to uncovering the essential structures of consciousness available today is to steep ourselves in the cross-cultural evidence pertaining to human experience and then explore the universal structures of experience via the application of a neurophenomenology. The neurosciences provide an independent source of looking directly at the architecture of the organ of experience, the human brain. Phenomenological anthropology provides a kind of cross-cultural laboratory for exploring these universal structures, as it were, from the inside. Phenomenology has a history in philosophy dating back to at least the phenomenology of mind of Georg Hegel in the early 19th century and has left a rich legacy of writings, especially those of Edmund Husserl in the early 20th century. The influence of phenomenology in educational research has been felt only quite recently. However, whether it applies to recovering the meaning of texts, ascertaining the effects of ritual practices in producing altered states of consciousness, discovering the universal structures underlying social interactions, or uncovering the universal neuropsychological structures producing experience, the telling impact of phenomenology in educational research continues. Probably the most important reason for the current attractiveness of phenomenology is that the issue of consciousness, long excluded from much of scientific discourse, has been reintroduced into the domains of ethnographic fieldwork and ethnological theory. Phenomenological methods can be expected to have enhanced importance to the extent that educational research becomes more focused on meaning and experience in any transpersonal or social encounter. 1.3.3 Phenomenology and Educational Research. The explanations of differential educational attainment that have been presented so far have been largely based on a positivist perspective. They have seen humans reacting to stimuli external to them, to social forces beyond their control. The behavior of students in the educational system is explained as a reaction to their position in the class structure. Those at the bottom of the stratification system are programmed to fail, those at the top to succeed. They have little say in the matter since their behavior is largely shaped by forces external to themselves. From an interactionist perspective, man actively constructs social reality. Her actions are not simply shaped by social forces which act upon him. Thus behavior is not merely a reaction to the directives of subcultures or the pressures of stratification systems, whereas the behavior of matter is a reaction to external stimuli. The actions of men and women are directed by meanings. They are created, developed, modified and changed in a process of negotiation. Cultural deprivation theory provides the standard explanation for the widespread failure of low-income Black American students in the educational system. The students simply react to their position at the bottom of the stratification system and predictably fail. From close observation of interaction situations, Leboff, 1973, provides a very different explanation. He compares 3 interviews involving an adult and a boy. In the first, the friendly, white interviewer presents a black boy with a toy jet plane. He asks him to describe it and prompts him with various questions. There are long silences followed by short 2 or 3 word answers, which hardly provide an adequate description of the plane. This behavior can easily be explained in terms of cultural deprivation theory. The boy is unable to provide an adequate description because he is linguistically deprived. His behavior is a predictable reaction to a culturally deprived environment. Leboff offers an alternative explanation based on the boy's interpretation of the situation. He defines the situation as hostile and threatening, and therefore his actions are defensive. This is clearly no test of the boy's verbal ability, it simply reflects his perception of the situation. In the second interview, the context of the interaction is modified. The interviewer sits on the floor, the interviewee is provided with a supply of potato crisps and his best friend is invited along. The change is dramatic. Leon's conversation is articulate and enthusiastic. And, its linguistic terms, rich and diverse. He now defines the situation as friendly and no longer feels threatened by the interviewer. In the first interview he is, in Leboff's words, a monosyllabic, inept, ignorant, fumbling child. In the second he is a direct, confident, articulate, young man. What does this mean? Leboff states, it means that the social situations are the most powerful determinants of verbal behavior and what an adult man can do. This is just what many teachers cannot do. More generally, it can be argued from an interactionist perspective that success and failure in schools is a product of interaction situations and the meanings that are created, developed and negotiated in such situations. It rejects positivist approaches which assume that human behavior can be objectively measured and quantified by methods similar to those used in the physical sciences. Thus, factors such as ability cannot be measured in the same way as variables such as weight, temperature and pressure. In order to understand and explain educational success and failure, the interaction processes in the classroom must be examined. The educational researchers must explore the ways in which teachers and students interpret and give meaning to educational situations. Given the fact that teachers have the power to award grades and assess students, it is important to discover the meanings which direct this process. An early piece of research which attempted to uncover some of these meanings was conducted by Howard S. Becker. He interviewed 60 teachers from Chicago high schools and found that they tended to classify and evaluate students in terms of a standard of the ideal pupil. This standard included the teacher's view of what constituted ideal work, conduct and appearance. Teachers interpreted the behavior of lower class students as indicating lack of interest and motivation and difficult to control. Becker argues that simply by perceiving certain students in this way, teachers experience problems in working with them. He concludes that the meanings in terms of which students are assessed and evaluated can have significant effects on interaction in the classroom and attainment levels in general. In a study entitled, The Education Decision Makers, Aaron V. Sikor and John I. Kitsus interviewed counselors in an American high school in an attempt to uncover the meanings which lay behind their classification of students. The counselors play an important part in students' educational careers since they largely decide which students should be placed on courses designed for preparation for college entry. Although they claim to use grades and the results of IQ tests as the basis for classifying students in terms of achievement. Sikor and Kitsus found significant discrepancies between these measures and the ways in which students were classified. Like Becker, they found that the student's social class was an important influence on the way he was evaluated within each society. 1.4 Critical Paradigm. Critical paradigm emphasizes that knowledge is problematic and capable of systematic distortion. The concern of the critical paradigm is to understand the theory as well as practices. 1.4.1 Paradigms. Paradigms are intended to help the researcher work at his/her trade. The first and foremost purpose of a paradigm is to supply a provisional codified guide for adequate and fruitful analyses. This objective evidently implies that a paradigm contains the minimum set of concepts with which the researcher must operate in order to carry out an adequate analysis and, as a corollary, that it can be used here and now as a guide for the study of existing analyses. Secondly, a paradigm is intended to lead directly to the postulates and, often tacit, assumptions underlying analyses. Some of the assumptions are of central importance, others insignificant and dispensable, and still others, dubious and even misleading. In the third place, a paradigm seeks to sensitize the researcher not only to the narrowly scientific implications of various types of critical analyses, but also to their political and sometimes ideological implications. The points at which a critical analysis presupposes an implicit political outlook and the points at which it has bearing on social engineering are concerns which find an integral place in the paradigm. The logic of procedure that a researcher follows, the key concepts, and the relationships between them are often lost in an avalanche of words. When this happens, the critical reader must laboriously glean for the implicit assumptions of the author. A paradigm reduces this tendency for the theorist to employ tacit concepts and assumptions. Functions of a paradigm. Paradigms have at least 5 closely related functions. First, paradigms have a notational function. They provide a compact arrangement of the central concepts and their interrelations that are utilized for description and analysis. Second, paradigms lessen the likelihood of inadvertently introducing hidden assumptions and concepts, for each new assumption and each new concept must be either logically derived from previous components of the paradigm or explicitly introduced into it. The paradigm thus provides a guide for avoiding ad hoc, i.e., logically irresponsible, hypotheses. Third, paradigms advance the cumulation of theoretical interpretation. In effect, a paradigm is the foundation upon which the house of interpretations is built. A paradigm worthy of great confidence will in due course support an interpretative structure of skyscraper dimensions, with each successive story testifying to the well-laid quality of the original foundation, while a defective paradigm will support only a rambling one-story structure, in which each new set of uniformities requires a new foundation to be laid, since the original cannot bear the weight of additional stories. Fourth, paradigms, by their very arrangement, suggest the systematic cross-tabulation of significant concepts and can thus sensitize the analyst to empirical and theoretical problems which she might otherwise overlook. Paradigms promote analysis rather than the description of concrete details. Fifth, paradigms make for the codification of qualitative analysis in a way that approximates the logical if not the empirical rigor of quantitative analysis. The procedures for computing statistical measures and their mathematical bases are codified as a matter of course. Their assumptions and procedures are open to critical scrutiny by all. 1.4.2 Elements of critical social research. Critical social research is extremely varied, but critical methodology is based on a number of building blocks. These blocks should not be considered as discrete units which can simply be placed next to one another. They are elements which are drawn together in various ways in the process of deconstruction and reconstruction. And they are abstraction, totality, essence, praxis, ideology, history and structure. Critical social research denies that its object of study is objective, social appearances. It regards the positivistic scientific method as unsatisfactory because it deals only with surface appearances. Instead, critical social research methodology cuts through surface appearance. It does so by locating social phenomena in their specific historical context. Historically specific phenomena cannot be regarded as independent, on the contrary, they are related to other phenomena within a prevailing social structure. Critical social research analyzes this structure. Social structures are maintained through the exercise of political and economic power. Such power, grounded in repressive mechanism, is legitimated through ideology. Critical social research thus addresses and analyses both the ostensive social structure and its ideological manifestations and processes. In examining the context of social phenomena, critical social research directs attention at the fundamental nature of phenomena. Rather than take the abstract phenomena for granted, it takes apart, i.e., deconstructs, the abstraction to reveal its inner relations and thus reconstructs the abstract concept in terms of the social structural relations that inform it. This process of deconstruction and reconstruction is effected in terms of the wider societal perspective, that is, in terms of a totalistic approach. A totalistic approach denies the relevance of looking at one element of a complex social process in isolation and argues that elements have to be looked at in terms of their interrelations and how they relate to the social structure as a whole. So critical social research is concerned with the broad social and historical context in which phenomena are interrelated. It is concerned with revealing underlying social relations and showing how structural and ideological forms bear on them. It, then, is interested in substantive issues, and wants to show what is really going on at a societal level. Not only does it want to show what is happening, it is also concerned with doing something about it. Abstraction. Abstraction is usually construed in terms of a distillation of sensory perception of the world of objects into conceptual categories. We start from the, literally, objective world, and select out the recurrent or apparently the core or the defining features until an abstract concept is formulated, at least in our minds if not in a directly communicable form. This process of distillation of some features from a set of observed objects is at the basis of most systems of classification. The process may be acceptable to phenomenalist approaches to knowledge, which involve an implicit assumption that science begins with factual observations and abstracts from them, but it is not adequate for critical social research. Indeed, the starting point for critical social research is to reverse this normal process of abstract thought. Critical social research admits that facts do not exist independently of their theoretical context. If facts are not self-evident, then concepts cannot be abstracted from them. Critical social research thus works by moving from the abstract to the concrete. It starts with abstract generalizations and investigates them. Critical methodology's use of abstractions, therefore, differs from the positivists' use. Because, rather than simply providing a basis for ordering appearances, they are used to get beneath the surface of appearances. Instead of simply adopting an empirical approach and logging housework tasks, a critical approach relates housework to the wider sphere of production and sees it as a work relationship. The penetration of this mode of productive relations begins to get beneath the surface of appearances. The superficial taken for granted task view of housework is replaced by dynamic conception, which provides the basis for a holistic critique of social processes. Totality. Totality refers to the view that social phenomena are interrelated and form a total whole. Further, it implies that a social phenomenon should be situated in a wider social context. It requires that social phenomena should not be analyzed in isolation. They should not be regarded as encapsulated by a narrowly defined realm which can be investigated in a way that suggests that they are self-contained elements or organisms. A totalistic perspective implies that the components are interrelated into a coherent structure, that they only have meaning in terms of the structure, and in turn the structure relies on the component parts. In adopting an approach in terms of totality, critical social research attempts to relate empirical detail to a structural and historical whole. Crucial to a critical methodological approach to history and structure are three things. First, an appreciation that social relations are historically specific. Second, an appreciation of the structural relations operating within a historical moment. Third, an appreciation of the structural relations operating within that historically specific structure and specific phenomenal forms. So, returning to Delphi's example of housework, the French mid-20th century housewife is seen as operating within a family unit whose internal exploitative relations are excluded from national accounting. The unremunerated, as opposed to unpaid, labor of the housewife both maintains the social and labor relationship of the family unit and is maintained by it. Essence. Essence refers to the fundamental element of an analytic process. Most positivists regard any concern with essences as bordering on the metaphysical. Their only overt acknowledgement is in relation to the reduction of social or physical processes to their essential causal links. Phenomenologists investigating the social world view essences in a rather different way. They seek the essential nature of social phenomena or social relations, that is, some kind of a core of being or an engagement with a stream of consciousness, or, less transcendentally, the set of constructs that informs interactive processes. For critical social researchers, essence is a fundamental concept that can be used as the key to unlocking the process of deconstruction. For Delphi, the essential nature of housework was not the set of tasks, nor its lack of payment but its location within the exploitative relations of the family unit. Housework is essentially a work relationship. It is unremunerated work done by one member of a family unit for another. Praxis. Praxis means practical reflective activity. It is what humans do most of the time. Praxis does not include instinctive or mindless activity like sleeping, breathing, walking, and so on, or undertaking repetitive work tasks. Praxis is what changes the world. For the critical social researcher, knowledge is not just about finding out about the world, but it is changing it. It is important, therefore, that a critical social researcher engages in praxis. However, the critical social researcher is not interested in the specific actions or reasons for actions of an individual. Individual actions are simply indicative of social groups operating within an oppressive social structure and/or historical juncture. What critical social research must take account of, in some way, is that changes in social formations are the results of praxis. So the subjects of any inquiry are analyzed in terms of their potential for developing group action. Further, however, critical social researchers engage oppressive social structures, and their own inquiries thus embody praxeological concerns. Critical social research is thus intrinsically praxeological. Thus, for example, Delphi argues that the analysis of housework cannot begin until the notion of household unit is overturned. Ideology. Ideology has not been easily translated into English and has tended to be little or poorly analyzed in much of the conventional social research. The difficulty in objectivizing ideology has led some social scientists to regard it as beyond scientific analysis and thus not important, or to replace it with terms like norms, values, and central value system. These alternative concepts, while attempting to operationalize the idea of social legitimations, dispense with the critical element and are of little use in developing a critical analysis which goes beneath surface appearances. Ideology as a concept has a long history, but it developed its current usage as an analytic and critical tool in the work of Marx and has been an important feature of Marxism. Marx suggested that ideology is present from the moment when social relations take on a hierarchical form. There are, arguably, two approaches to a critical analysis of ideology: the positive and the negative views of ideology. Larrain, 1979-1982. Ideology, of course, does not simply relate to class exploitation. Gender, race, and other forms of oppression have been legitimated in ideological terms. Patriarchal and racist ideologies can be seen as part of or alternatives to class-based hegemony. For Delphi, the discussion of housework and a set of tasks reflects a patriarchal ideology which obscures the real relations of production within the family unit. Structure. Structure is a term used in two ways in social research. Its principal meaning and the one applicable to critical social research is of structure viewed holistically as a complex set of interrelated elements which are interdependent and which can only be adequately conceived of in terms of the complete structure. An alternative use of the term structure is to see it as something that can be reduced to its elements. The complexity of a structure is decomposed into a network of linked parts with a view to exposing the elements and simplifying the whole. It is assumed that the elements make sense in their own right. This is more aptly described as a system. Possibly the easiest way to distinguish structure from system is to see a system as congealed patterns of interaction, and structure as underlying model of the world that structuralists seek to identify. For Delphi, to break housework down into a system of tasks ignores the relationship between the elements and the whole, which is one of a transforming social relation. The exploitative nature of the task done as housework can only be seen when the individual domestic labor is related to the family unit and the domestic unit is related to the broader economic unit. To see housework as tasks denies this structural relationship. History. History refers to both the reconstructed account of past events and the process by which this reconstruction is made, that is, the process of doing history. History writing then involves both a view about the nature of history and the assembling of historical materials. There are a number of ways of doing history and a number of different schemes of categorizing history. Rather than assess these differing views, the nature of the historical perspective embodied in critical social research will be outlined. Critical social research involves two essential elements: the grounding of a generalized theory in material history and the exposure of the essential nature of structural relations, which manifest themselves historically. Critical social research does not accept that history is essentially factual. It denies that history exists and is just lying around waiting to be unearthed by the historian. Like the product of the activity of the historian, reconstructing history is the result of an active interpretation of the available archaeological, documentary, or oral evidence. Approaches that adopt a view of history as an interpretative process rather than the gathering of already existing facts are usually referred to as historicist approaches. Historicism has been adapted as an approach for critical social research in its radical formulations. Radical historicism adopts the basic historicist tenets of history as a presentist, objectivist and interpretative process, but in one way or another attempts to dig beneath the surface of historical manifestations. Structural historicism is the process of reconstructing a honed-down history, devoid of confusing instances, as a result of new perspective gained from a critique of prevailing social structures. This approach analyzes the prevailing structure and its ideology, deconstructs it, and then reconstructs a logical history guided by the structural analysis. The point of reference for the historicist reconstruction is not the prevailing social system or contemporary perspective but the radical, dialectically reconstructed, social structure. So, like all aspects of critical social research, history is not just there waiting to be picked up and fitted into the critical historical account. History has to be researched and critically evaluated as well. Within critical social research, the reconstruction of history takes place alongside the structural analysis. It both informs and is informed by it. Deconstruction and reconstruction. Deconstruction and reconstruction begin from the abstract concepts, which are applied to, or used in relation to, an area of investigation. In practice, there may be a large list of concepts. It is not necessary to attempt a separate critical analysis of each. They are all interrelated, and so the key is to locate a central concept and critically analyze it. From that, the other concepts can be reconstructed. Before addressing how the central concept is analyzed, it is important to note that the deconstructive reconstructive process is not just abstract concept analysis tacked onto the usual idealized sequence of events in a research undertaking. Critical social research is not embodied in a series of discrete phases. It is not just abstract concept analysis followed by hypothesis generation, data collection, data analysis, and the Generation of results, with the implications for a theory added at the end. Critical social. Research develops the different elements in parallels, each aspect informing each of the other aspects. The researcher is concerned with a realm of inquiry, usually provoked by a particular question that demands attention, such as, why do some youngsters not make the most of the opportunity offered by the education system, or should women get paid for housework? These questions frame an area of inquiry. The first job is to explore its central concepts. The selection of a central concept is not simple, but, as we shall see in the substantive examples, neither is it impossible. Take housework. The conventional approach is to see it as a set of tasks. Delphi addressed it as unpaid domestic work. She showed that deconstructing housework in these terms did not work. Such an analysis failed to address the inconsistencies between work done in one's own home and work done in another's. Nor could it deal with the difference between work which was done at home which was regarded as economically accountable yet unpaid, butchering a pig, and that which was not, cooking the pig. A more useful deconstruction was to see housework in terms of a relation of production, as work done for another family member. The exploitative nature of housework is thus reconstructible. The hidden nature of this exploitation in economic accounting, which focuses on the family unit, is revealed in this analysis by analyzing the relationships within the family. To sum up, the dialectical deconstructive reconstructive process can be conceived as a process of focusing on the structural totality or historical moment. The totality is taken initially as an existing whole. This structure presents itself as natural, as the result of historical progress, i.e., it is ideologically constituted. The critical analysis of the historically specific structure must therefore go beyond the surface appearances and lay bare the essential nature of the relationships that are embedded in the structure. This critique ostensibly begins by fixing on the fundamental unit of the structural relationships and decomposing it. The fundamental unit must be broken down until its essential nature is revealed. The structure is then reconstituted in terms of this essentialized construct. The reconstructive process reveals the transparency of ideology. The whole is grounded in historically specific material reality. 1.4.3 Critical research process. Doing educational research is not just about selecting and constructing a data collection technique. On the contrary, it embraces conceptualization of the problem, theoretical debate, specification of research practices, analytic frameworks, and epistemological presuppositions. Data collection is not a self-contained phase in a linear process. Rather, all aspects of the research process are interrelated and all bear on each other. There is no neat linear sequence of events as the idealized research report format, i.e., theoretical background, hypothesis, and design of research instrument, data collection, test of hypothesis, findings, and implications for theory. However much the idealized form of research design and presentation get imposed on other form of research, critical social research is not conducive to such manipulation. Critical social research deconstructs and reconstructs. But this is not like taking a house apart brick by brick and building a bungalow using the same bricks. Reconstruction is not just rebuilding but reconceptualization. The nature of the reconceptualization process emerges only as the illusion of the existing taken for granted structure is revealed. There is a shuttling back and forth between what is being deconstructed and what is being reconstructed. The nature of both emerges together. In short, critical social research is a dialectical process that cannot be broken down into successive, discrete stages. So what do you do as a critical researcher, as opposed to what do you say you did when reporting the research? You have to start somewhere, and there is no better place than with the observation, concern, frustration, or doubt that provoked the inquiry. Ask yourself why things are as they appear to be. But frame the question, not in terms of what are the causes, or what does this mean, but rather as, how does it persist? Ask, how come nothing is done about it? Or, how come no one notices? Or, how is it that people accept what clearly is not in their interest? Ask such questions and from there get a clearer picture of what you are really asking about. Asking these kinds of questions will lead you to 3 related lines of inquiry. First, what is essentially going on? Pink packaging of girls' toys is not about, why is it pink? But about, why are some toys demarcated as girls' toys? Second, why has this historically been the case? Why have girls traditionally had certain toys? Third, why structures reproduce this state of affairs? Why do firms manufacture, and people continue to buy, these toys for girls? Empirical inquiry will start to provide a clearer focus for the questions. Find out what toys are currently marketed for girls. To what extent are they traditional toys? How long has the tradition been going? What changes have occurred over time? What leads people to continue to buy traditional gender-defined toys? Through empirical inquiry, broad abstractions can be filled out and made concrete. Start to broaden the inquiry. Make connections between myths or contradictions that emerge from the empirical inquiry and broader stereotypes or ideological constructs. Assumptions about girls' toys reproduce gender stereotypes. Why do these gendered myths persist? Even people who are aware of the stereotyping still buy gendered toys. Why does this anomaly occur? Relate the myths and/or contradictions back to the empirical data on the one hand and to broader social structures on the other. Gendered toys are bought because children want them. Why? Because they see advertisements for gendered toys on television. What role does the media play in reproducing gender stereotypes? How does marketing target customers? How is gender created in the way advertisers refer to already constituted subjects? Do not just assume relationships as the inquiry develops but undertake further empirical inquiry. Watch the advertisements, look at school reading books, ask manufacturers about marketing strategies, etc. Ask broader questions of data. Do manufacturers stick to the same gendered toys because they are easier and safer to market? Why don't people demand alternatives? Begin to reveal the nature of ideological forms, how they impinge upon the area of inquiry, and whose interests are served by them. Gradually, bring the specific and the societal, the immediate and the historical together in a totalistic analysis. Avoid sweeping away the inquiry with grandiose but important explanations that implicate socialization, patriarchy, capitalism, or racism. Critical social research is praxeological, so it is necessary to examine in detail how people collude in their own oppression, how they are persuaded to reproduce historical social structures, and so on. It is a close and detailed study which shows how historical oppressive social structures are legitimated and reproduced in specific practices. Critical research thus raises consciousness, subverts in legitimating processes, and provides clear analyses of the nature and operation of the oppressive structures. Critical research must be detailed if it is to be revealing and convincing. Empirical evidence is crucial. Such evidence may arise from asking people questions, or by watching and participating in what people do, or by reviewing what has happened in the past, or by analyzing cultural products. Data may be aggregated or treated as unique testimony. It does not matter whether one computes the percentage of toys that are gendered by being packaged in pink. Ask children's television. Do any or all of these things turn to be appropriate to advancing the inquiry? But make sure that techniques are undertaken within a critical methodology. What is important is that nothing is taken for granted and that what is, or has been, done or said is related to historical developments and social structures. Having done the study and gained an understanding, the production of a report is your chance to share that understanding with others. The traditional approach to reporting. Empirical work should be avoided. This traditional approach to research reporting tends to a structure which idealizes the research process as a logical sequence of discrete phases. It suggests an introduction which provides an overview of the context, a literature review, the identification of the theoretical concern of the research, the specification of hypotheses, a central block of results, an analysis of the results, the implications for theory, and suggestions for further research. Critical social research is primarily concerned with analysis and reporting of substantive issues rather than the artificial logic of the research process. The substantive issue is the central focus of the work, and any critical social research report must indicate what central question is being addressed. A central plot must be identified and this plot sustained throughout. In effect, the core argument remains as a skeleton which is filled out by empirical details. 1.4.4 Approaches in critical social research. Critical social research makes considerable use of 4 approaches: critical case study, radical historicism, critical ethnography, and structuralist techniques. This is not, in any way, meant to delimit what approaches critical social researchers can adopt nor do. These 4 approaches constitute a set of mutually exclusive alternatives. Critical case study. In a critical, or theoretical, case study, the researcher deliberately selects, for detailed empirical analysis, a case which provides a specific focus or analysis of a myth or contradiction. This approach is effectively adopted by Cockburn, 1983. A variety of different data collection techniques can be adopted within a critical case study approach. The researchers relied principally on structured interviews augmented by observation in ascertaining the interests, attitudes, social networks and lifestyles of their case study groups. Cockburn preferred in-depth interviewing with the case study group. There is nothing inherently advantageous in any particular data collection method for critical case study. The case study is not an end in itself, rather it is an empirical resource for the exploration of wider questions about the nature of oppressive social structures. What is important is that the study is designed to critically address myths or contradictions at the level of actual practices that relate to broader questions about the operation of oppression. Radical historicism. Radical historicism presupposes that constructing histories is an interpretative process rather than the recording of facts. Although reconstructing the past in terms of the present in one way or another, it attempts to dig beneath the surface of the historical development of structural forms. Radical historicism involves the uncovering of historical evidence, but the meaning of the evidence depends on a reconceptualization of dominant social structures. The reconstruction of history takes place alongside structural analysis. It informs and is also informed by it. Liddell and Joshi, for example, did not just document the stages in the curtailment of women's freedom in India but related the particular practices, on the one hand, to economic considerations related to the concentration of wealth in upper castes, and on the other, to a concerted effort by men to undermine the female power principle. Critical ethnography. Critical ethnography is a widely used technique in critical social research. The involvement and close attention to detail which characterizes ethnography makes it useful for rendering visible the invisible, and for revealing anomalies and common sense notions. A critical ethnography transforms the anomalies and taken for granted into contradictions and myths by situating them in broader social and historical analyses. Critical ethnography thus focuses on the way in which contradictions are negotiated and myths represented. Critical ethnography differs from conventional or traditional ethnography in its attempt to link the detailed analysis of ethnography to wider social structures and systems of power relationships in order to get beneath the surface of oppressive structural relationships. In essence, critical ethnography attempts, in one way or another, to incorporate detailed ethnographic analysis directly into a dialectical critique. Critical ethnography proceeds by raising substantive questions about structural relationships which the ethnographic study elaborates in terms of actual practice. Like the critical case study, the details of the ethnographic work is a resource in the deconstruction of social structures. Critical ethnography makes use of the same data collection technique as conventional ethnography, in-depth interviewing, participant observation, etc., and is also reflexive. However, there is far less concern with neutrality, both in terms of the interventionist role of the researcher and the presentation of a nonpartisan perspective. The intention is to go beyond the grasping of the subject's meanings. Critical ethnography. asks how these meanings relate to wider cultural and ideological forms. It involves keeping alert to structural factors while probing meanings. Through ideological analysis, critical ethnography aims to reveal both contradictions and myths. Inconsistencies, for example, between what people do and what they say are transformed from anomalies to contradictions. What, for example, black community college students had to say about timekeeping and what they actually did was anomalous. It became an analytic contradiction once it was explained in terms of the notion of white man's clock time. Lip service to the white middle-class meritocratic system while living in an everyday milieu that operated on a different sense of time. Structuralist techniques. There are two main structuralist techniques incorporated into critical social research. First, there is semiological analysis, which attempts to uncover the connoted level of denoted messages. This approach is widely used in relation to the mass media but is applicable to, and derives from, a general approach to the analysis of any sign system. Semiological analysis sees a sign as any cultural symbol which conveys a meaning. The sign is made up of two elements, signifier and signified. The signifier is a sound or image which signifies something. For example, the sound, dog, is a signifier for four-legged mammal that barks. What is signified is the concept, dog. Hence the sign is the concrete relation between concept, signified, and sound, image, signifier. Signs are arbitrary. They have no intrinsic meaning but take their meaning from the relationship to other signs. The meaning of a sign comes from its difference from other signs. The key of semiological analysis is that signs do not have intrinsic meaning. Meaning is generated through the relationship of signs. The second structuralist technique centers around the identification of binary oppositions and narrative sequences. The approach again draws on linguistics and presupposes that the structure of language is inherently dichotomous and, consequently, the symbolic meaning of an image is determined only by differences. When, for example, two characters in a study are opposed in a binary structure, their symbolic meaning is virtually forced to be both general and easily accessible because of the simplicity of the differences between them. This binary structure operates to provide conceptual differences, and each society has a system of such oppositions. It is through them that myths are, unconsciously, understood by members. Levi-Strauss, 1963. A second aspect of this technique is the deconstruction of a narrative into a set of functions. Prop, 1968, for example, in analyzing Russian fairy stories, identified a set of shared functions that recurred in the same order. This structuralist approach is transformed into a critical social research process when the binary oppositions and the narrative functions are related to the prevailing socio-economic and political structure. It is then that their social meaning becomes manifest. 1.5 Summary. Empirical research depends on observation and induction. The empiricist uses all kinds of research tools: observation, both participant and non-participant, formal interviews, structured, semi-structured, unstructured and in-depth interviews, analysis of documents, mass media analysis, archive searching, examination of official statistics and reviews of published data. She also uses a wide variety of analytic techniques: ethnographic interpretations, historical reconstructions, action research, multivariate analysis, structuralist deconstruction and semiological analysis. Phenomenology and critical research are two major approaches that have developed in recent times. Phenomenological perspectives in social research reject many assumptions of positivism. They argue that the subject matter of social and natural sciences is fundamentally different. Phenomenology is a philosophy of knowledge that emphasizes direct observation of phenomena. Phenomenologists concentrate on phenomena per se, and try to produce convincing descriptions of what they experience rather than explanations and causes. The most important reason for the current attractiveness of phenomenology is that the issue of consciousness, long excluded from much of scientific discourse, has been reintroduced into the domains of ethnographic fieldwork and ethnological theory. Phenomenological methods can be expected to have enhanced importance to the extent That educational research becomes more focused on meaning and experience in any transpersonal or social encounter. The critical educational researchers are not like other researchers who merely talk rather than observe, or merely observe rather than think, or merely think rather than put their thoughts to the test of systematic empirical investigation. Doing critical educational research is not just about selecting and constructing a data collection technique. On the contrary, it embraces conceptualization of the problem, theoretical debate, specification of research practices, analytic frameworks and epistemological presuppositions. Critical research presents the hardcore of concept, procedure and inference in the analysis of social research. It does not represent a set of categories introduced anew, but rather codification of those concepts of problems which have been forced upon our attention by critical scrutiny of current research and theory. Critical research digs beneath the surface of extensive appearances through direct analysis of social phenomena. The concepts which frame and define an area of inquiry are themselves subject to critical analysis. Specific phenomena are analyzed in terms of the way they relate to wider social structures and in terms of their historical manifestations. The critical rebuilding involves a process of conceptual shuttling back and forth between the particular phenomena under investigation and the wider structure and history to which it relates, between the taken for granted and the deconstructed concepts, and between the theoretical deconstruction and the reconstructed social totality. Thank you. Subscribe to our channel for more updates, and we will see you with the next chapter.